no social movement in the history of the world has won without young people's involvement. Tenants, anyone who does not have control over their housing, when organized with one another, can change the very fabric of our housing system and culture as it relates to our communities. My name is Kasey McNaughton. I am the Director of Organizing with the Youth Alliance for Housing, lovingly known as YAH for short. YAH, or the Youth Alliance for Housing, we are a collective of young people fighting to radically transform the housing system in New York and the country. While youth typically aren't the head of household or handling the legal aspects of housing, we believe that we are tenants too. We define a tenant as anyone who does not have complete control over their housing. At YAH, we envision a world where housing is decommodified, homelessness does not exist, and every single person is guaranteed a safe, quality, and permanently affordable home. We also believe that those closest to the issues are closest to the solutions and are experts in their experiences. And we fight to build power of all young people in order to advance the broader tenant movement, because we believe that a intergenerational tenant movement is a strong tenant movement. Some of the things that we deeply believe in are that no social movement in the history of the world has won without young people's involvement, and that tenants, anyone who does not have control over their housing, when organized with one another, can change the very fabric of our housing system and culture as it relates to our communities. So with that being said, we do follow the understanding that tenants, especially tenants in the United States, hold in their hands billions of dollars of capital in the form of their rent checks every month, in the form of whatever you're paying for your mortgage or for your rent or for access to home in whatever capacity that means to you. If tenants were to stop paying their rent tomorrow, the global economy would be on its knees begging for tenants to help them. And we see that as a huge source of power that is deeply untapped in so much of the country. At YAH, the work that we're involved in is what Katie talked about, COPA, the Community Opportunity to Purchase Act. We see COPA as a way for people who grew up in New York to be able to stay in New York, and for young people in New York to be able to live on their own eventually in New York. I know so many young people who are like, I'm going to be living with my mom and dad for a while, which is great. We love our parents, but we would like a space of our own in some capacity. We also see COPA as a way to remove housing from the deeply speculative market that New York City exists in. Many of us here probably know that New York is run by the financial, insurance, and real estate industry, lovingly known as the FIRE industry. And so we're happy to support it. And we go out and lobby at every stated meeting for COPA the past couple of months with a bunch of other youth organizers from the Young Democratic Socialists of America, from Fridays for Future, from Equal Planet, and a couple of other organizations like New York Transgender Advocacy Group, to force politicians to see why COPA is such a youth issue, as well as just a general New York issue. We also are involved in the Student Tenant Rights Campaign. This is a campaign of our own creation. It's focused right now on building really robust tenant unions at some of the largest property owners and most violent slumlords in our country, the university systems. Right now, we have 4 tenant unions at SUNY Stony Brook, SUNY Albany, SUNY Purchase, and the University of Vermont, because technically we are a national org. And the reason why is because we saw so many students being evicted for political involvement over the years, and being evicted in a way that was extremely violent. Students would be arrested on campus. Then a no contact order was given from the university to that student. So the student was unable to go and retrieve any of their belongings. At Columbia, approximately 2 years ago now, students were evicted with 15 minutes to gather their belongings. Everything else was to be trashed. Students lost thousands of dollars of belongings, as well as felt extremely violated by the university that they pay money towards to go to. So this Student Tenant Rights Campaign is asking the bigger question of, if students pay money to someone to live in the dorm and have a contract establishing a tenant-landlord agreement, why are they not offered lease agreements, and why are they not offered tenant protections given to other New Yorkers? Now, with Good Cause in effect, which for folks who don't know, Good Cause was a bill won by groups like Housing Justice for All and the New Economy Project, who signed on to it. to say that your evictions have to be with good cause. You can't just be thrown out during winter because they want to clean the building. And students are forced to leave their buildings in summer and winter, no matter what. And a lot of the students that we see and a lot of the young people that we meet are unfortunately unable to return home due to violence in the home or due to being unsafe in the home. So the Student Tenant Rights Campaign is fighting for lease agreements in all SUNY student dorming and all university-owned housing, because without that lease, there are so many violations that happen on a day-to-day basis and some really disgusting living conditions that we see university students living in, such as black mold, bats, inaccessible buildings where wheelchair users are forced to figure out how to get into their dorm when the elevators break, utilizing maybe the help of their friends to get them up staircases. Even in some instances, we've seen bat infestations in dorms, meaning that students are then being exposed to potential rabies bites, which is not fun. And then our last two are, we believe in doing mutual aid work. We need to fight to keep each other housed while we are fighting for the world that we deserve. The here and now is really important to a lot of our membership. So we actually have a recurring donation software at that tiny URL link where your donation recurring every month, whether it's $1 or $100, is redistributed to someone who is facing maybe eviction or someone who cannot support themselves with food at the moment. We specifically target Black women and femmes and non-binary people living in New York City who are 25 years and younger, as that is a group of people that we know kind of fall through the cracks in terms of our social safety nets. And then we also are fighting for a rent freeze in our organization alongside Housing Justice for All. But we are some of the folks that say a rent freeze is good right now, but the rent is already too high. And so many of us deserve rent rollbacks. These are just some pillars of our work. And we fight tirelessly every day to keep everything together. There is more coming down the pipeline regarding our work in public housing as well. We are trying to develop more members who live in both NYCHA complexes and Mitchell-Lama complexes, so that way we can build a more robust work inside public housing, because as I believe Renee said, public housing is our current form of social housing, and it deserves to be invested in, and it deserves to be maintained and improved, while we are also working on building other forms of social housing. But right now, Mitchell-Lama, there are 86 out of 100 standing buildings, and Mitchell-Lama is right now fighting a huge fight of privatization. There is a Coney Island Mitchell-Lama that is about to be privatized after, I believe, like on an 8-year path of privatization. And those are a lot of units lost to privatization. And in terms of rent regulated apartments, rent stabilized apartments, over the course of 20 years, 400,000 units of rent stabilized housing were lost. And so we have a lot of questions ourselves about how do we get those back on the path to re-regulation? How do we keep people in their homes and let people live in the city that they love for as long as possible? We have a lot of different stakeholders in our membership organization, but we are all young people. I'm actually the oldest. I'm 26. Our youngest member is 13. And we do our best to make sure that any time that we are in positions of coalition spaces, that we have a young person who's prepped and ready to speak their opinions on housing, because our housing system deeply disenfranchises everyone, but it especially disenfranchises children who maybe can't vote, who are at the behest of schools or universities or their parents' situation moving around. So that's a bit about the Youth Alliance for Housing. I came into tenant organizing because my family saw owning a home as the way out of this horrible speculative system. But it ended up turning out that my parents, when faced with financial difficulty, had to sell that family home and put us right back onto the speculative market. So that's why we encourage folks who are mortgage holders to join in the tenant movement and the tenant fight, because we're all a couple paychecks away from being back into precarious situations. So we fight with people who, say that a tenant is only a renter. We believe that tenants are everyone who have a stake in the housing system's predatory nature.
Kasey, that's amazing. I wish we connected. We were doing a lot of outreach with public housing, food distribution, and gathering people. We still are. We want to kind of connect with all these public housing. We've done that to some degree. Caitlin?
Hi, thank you, Kasey. It was really wonderful to hear about your work. I'm interested in how you do outreach, how you bring young people into your organizing.
Yeah, that's probably the most common question we get. Well, sometimes we'll be reached out to by young people who say, my building is a mess and I would love help with getting it organized. Sometimes young people find us through just us tabling outside. We go where young people are. We know that not all young people are students and not all students are young people. So going to schools, it can be kind of hit or miss, and even the universities. So you'll find us often tabling outside of public parks where kids hang out after school, students hang out after school. You'll find us at events at the universities as well as at high schools. We also do a lot of door knocking, and we leave our card for anyone in the building. Like when we're on rent freeze, I hand people our literature too, in the off chance that they have a child who's like, I'm ready to become a tenant organizer. And not just in an intern capacity or in a like, oh, I'm learning capacity, but as a leader who understands their experience very well. Leonard, I see you have a question.
Can we get copies of your literature? There are people in our complexes that I think could and should be part of your organization.
Okay. Yeah, I can connect with you, John, maybe, and then I can find time to do like a card drop for you all.
We're doing a lot of actions too, and we want to connect with the youth, and Caitlin received a grant. We've received a grant through her, and we're working on a project, and Caitlin will be happy to go over that with you too. Maybe we'll meet you and I and Lynn on a Zoom, and Luana too, Alex. So yeah, we need you.
Thank you, Kasey, so much, and thank you for what you're doing. I'm curious about the Columbia University situation where President Trump made Columbia pay back some money, but it was really a moot point because it's a 0-0 balance, right? But what effects did his position have on the students at Columbia and their evictions and their residencies? And also, Columbia has a lot of property around New York City and now infiltrating like Upper Manhattan and Harlem, and NYU, yeah, they have really a lot of property all over the city, and I wonder, how does your organization help with those students that are having issues with those two campuses in regards to the Israel fight and also to just their housing situation? Thank you.
Yeah. So actually, the birth of our student tenant rights campaign was the fact that we know that Columbia is the largest private landowner in the city, and NYU is the largest landowner in the state of New York. They own the most property per capita. And it is one of those, we are working with the New York City Student Union or Union of Students. They are going to be shifting their repair campaign, which is about Columbia and NYU offering back their taxes to the CUNY system. But right now we're also in talks about how do we start organizing the tenants that are going to be affected by the Columbia expansion. Unfortunately, I feel that the Columbia expansion is going to be pushed through, no matter what people say or how they advocate. So the real question is how do we organize all of those tenants in that corridor that Columbia is expanding to be able to fight that expansion every step of the way? A lot of people ask us, well, is that legal? Is it okay? Is it XYZ? I think like the billionaires don't care what is legal. And I think that tenants should do the same. I think that we get questions a lot about like, what is a rent strike legal? I don't care if a rent strike is legal. If your landlord isn't repairing the building, and this is the last escalation you have before you get evicted, then that's what has to happen. And so we are in talks with some of the Columbia law school students who are trying to organize both unaffiliated Columbia tenants, so people who are in buildings owned by Columbia as a landlord through a shell corporation or through a subsidiary, I should say. I shouldn't call it a shell, but through a subsidiary, as well as professors, grad students, law students, and undergrad students to get them organized in a larger tenant union. And that's in a very early stage right now. Same thing with NYU. Because of how NYU owns their housing, it makes it very difficult to organize. They also just bulldoze down half of Alphabet City. I'm sure we all know. If you ever get to see the Museum of Reclaimed Urban Space, they talk a lot about that. So we're trying our best to connect with those folks. New York City Union of Students does a lot. And our comrades in like Columbia and NYU who are fighting right now are doing what they can. We're organizing on a state level because we think that if we can focus on the SUNY system and make that a norm for the tenant unions to exist there, then the private universities can be dealt with at a much more serious level from the state government. And that's a bit of like our thinking there. But we're also always, learning and changing our plans and our schemes to win big for tenants.
You got a good strategy there. And we need that critical mass. Kasey, I appreciate having you here. Fantastic.